saludar.
Nosotros que volvemos a pasar de la geopolítica a la economía. Les contábamos que Dimon, el CEO de JPMorgan, advertía sobre una grieta en el mercado de bonos. Vamos a escucharle, conectamos con el CEO de JPMorgan.
So thrilled to be here. I'm glad you're doing this. I hope we may join the defense forum you guys do every year too. And the way I look at it, the big picture is the tectonic plates are shifting. We got to get our heads wrapped around that. Those tectonic plates are the geopolitics with these terrible wars, terrible proxy terrorist activity around the world, North Korea, the potential proliferation of nuclear weapons over time, which is the greatest threat to mankind. And then you have the other tectonic shift is the global economy. So the global military umbrella of America, and then the global economy, of which trade is a part. You know, the other parts are do people want to partner with you? Do you have your alliances? Do you have investment agreements? And all those various things, and they're changing. And then our debt, which you just heard a bunch of folks talk about eloquently, it's large, and it's not just us. We added $10 trillion in 5 years. We have, you know, you had Reagan up there talking about deficits. The debt to GDP was 35%, and the deficit was 3.5%. Today, it's 100% debt to GDP net, and a deficit of almost 7%, highest peacetime ever. And when the CBO does their numbers, which I don't really trust, by the way, they should do the stress test. Like, what happens if we go into a recession? That 7% will be 10%. And so we have problems, and we got to deal with them. And then the biggest one, underlying both that, is the enemy within. I'm not as worried about China. China is a potential adversary. They're doing a lot of things well. They have a lot of problems. What I really worry about is us. Can we get our own act together, our own values, our own capability, our own management? What you heard today on stage was the amount of mismanagement is extraordinary, by state, by city, for pensions, and that stuff is going to kill us. And, you know, I always get asked this question, are we going to be the reserve currency? And no, you know, if we are not the preeminent military and the preeminent economy in 40 years, we will not be the reserve currency. That's a fact. Just read history. You know, now I think we will be. You know, Warren Buffett here would tell you we're enormously resilient. I agree with that. I think this time is different. This time we have to get our act together, and we have to do it very quickly.
That was a big answer. There's a lot to dig into there. So the takeaway is geopolitics.
I have a great quote for the first thing too. Someone said the government spends like a drunken sailor, and someone else said, no, a drunken sailor spends his own money. I forgot who said that one.
So you're talking about a total realignment of the global order. We're talking about a restructuring and simultaneous reassertion of American hegemony in the middle of all this. Huge gamble afoot right now with some of the policies that are coming out and how they're taking shape. What does it take for it to pay off?
You know, I mean, just a list of stuff. Okay, we have to acknowledge the grievances that have put us in this position to start with, and they're real. Okay, immigration. What the hell were we doing? You know, the bottom 20% of our population, you know, their wages didn't go up for 20 years. They're dying 7 years younger. You know, when administrations, you know, the Biden administration is giving all this money to EVs and cars and wasting a lot of money on green stuff, which isn't going to work, and all that. Do you think people in rural cities, do you think people in inner cities thought they were getting anything? Do you think that those people think that the American government is fair and competent and that this was in their best interest? Their schools don't work. They're not getting the skills they need. And you heard that just now. So we got to acknowledge, and I also call it blue tape, because, you know, Republicans, you generally don't like red tape. You understand the devastation of it. But, you know, most Democrats, they love it. They want more of it. And they want to make it so confusing you can't even meet the rules, so you get punished and fined afterwards. And so, you know, and then you have it in permitting, and, you know, I call the government the Leviathan that's too weak, can't get stuff done, and too strong. It imposes things on the American public that they're getting sick of, and they should be getting sick of it, and acknowledge that. Celebrate our virtues: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise, equal opportunity, family, God, country. You know, and you can acknowledge the flaws that we have, which are extraordinary. What we did to the black population for years. Don't denigrate the great things of this country, because those are two different things. If you have in any team, if you put a team on the field and the team's torn apart, they're going to lose. And that's kind of us right now. You know, we're not a team anymore, and we don't collaborate. We don't talk that much to each other. Deal with our policies, and this is the enemy within. We've got to fix our permitting, our regulations, our immigration, our taxation, which I think they're on their way. We have to fix our inner city schools, our healthcare system. If we fix those things, we can grow 3% a year and all these problems will disappear. But the most important is maintain those military alliances, spend whatever you got to spend to have the strongest military in the world, and I think the goal, I'm hoping the goal of the Trump administration is this: keep the Western military alliances together. If the world cannot rely on America's military umbrella, we may have paid too much, we have not done it. If the world can't rely on it, they are going to be looking for alternatives. Only one other real alternative out there, or getting a nuclear weapon. And then maintain and expand and grow our economic alliance. We have tons of treaties, economic treaties. We do a terrible job in development finance, but expand that. The goal, beating up Europe, the goal should be help Europe get stronger. We know what their problems are. Keep them closer. Do the trade agreements and the investment agreements. They'll keep the Western world together. Those two things will keep the world safe and free for democracy. If we don't do those things, the world is not safe and free for democracy. And so that's what we have to do. And people know what they are. We've all written about it. We just have failed to actually do it.
So tariffs are obviously in the mix right now, but we also know that a number of countries, the game plan here is to get to trade deals. How do you think that shakes out? Do you think this ultimately, maybe looking to the end of this year or the end of this term for this president, that we actually end up in closer alliances with some of our trading partners than we have?
We did a little bit of too much everything everywhere all at once. So it's hard to step back from that and finish. I think the best we can hope for, and we should hope for, and I think I see them doing this, which is to finish, maybe there's 15 important ones, finish them. There'll be agreements in principle. They will not be trade agreements, but agreements in principle, at least give you a framework, to get things done. And hopefully they could do some in July, August, September, October, November. I would engage with China. I just got back from China last week. They're not scared, folks. This notion they're going to come bow to America, I wouldn't count on that. And when they have a problem, they put 100,000 engineers on it, and they've been preparing for this for years. So, but we should engage. And when we do these trade agreements, the most important part is not, TV, making TVs or making furniture or T-shirts or sneakers. Stuff like that. It should be the stuff that relates to national security. Okay, that's rare earths, medical, pharmaceutical ingredients, penicillin, and it's things which closely relate to national security. Maybe AI, narrowly done. The chips you're here reading about, and then things which I think are very unfair trade, where they might be using merciless behavior to dominate global industries. That is the stuff of war, by the way. If you read all history, that is what started it. And that might be cars, batteries, solar panels, stuff like that. That we should do with their allies. It's not going to do America a great job if we come and hold it off, but we don't stop them, beggaring thy neighbor or beggaring Europe. So we have to be we should be doing some of that with their allies.
What you're getting at is
and our allies need our help, by the way. They know they need to do some of these things, and some of them won't be able to do it without us.
There's this expanding intersection between industrial policy in this country and national security, which sort of gets at what you're talking about with some of these different industries. And it's spanning the last couple of administrations. Everybody devils in the details in terms of how the policies shake out across administrations. But I guess to that point, do we need to rethink what constitutes national security?
I wouldn't rethink it. We know what constitutes national security. We need, I was saying we shouldn't be stockpiling Bitcoin. We should be stockpiling guns, bullets, tanks, planes, drones, rare earths. We know what we need to do. This is not a mystery.
Did you say stockpiling Bitcoin?
I said we shouldn't be stockpiling Bitcoin.
Oh, it shouldn't be. Okay.
We should be stockpiling bullets.
Okay.
The military guys tell you that, if there's a war in the South China Sea, we have missiles for 7 days. Okay, come on. I mean, we can't say that with a straight face and think that's okay. So we know what to do. We just got to now go about doing it. Get the people together, roll up our sleeves, have the debates, do some privately, do some publicly. JPMorgan is going to publish we call it the Defense Action Form, something that shows we don't leave excess surplus production capability for missiles or bullets or bombs. We don't have a military that can flexibly move money from, you see how quickly the software and hardware they need changes. So the military can't have a 30-year program. They've got to be able to cancel that drone program, build up that drone program, hire this person to do the software. We have to allow them to do multi-year budgeting. We essentially don't. The military tells me it costs them $50 billion a year, and we have to spend more. I mean, so I go on and on and on. We're going to lay out all these things and hopefully help, just get going there. I think they know, but I think all of us in this room know about this. It's just now we have to do it.
When you talk about spending more, a lot of focus on.
And I'll add one of the things that is important. I know, Jason, you've done. I don't know if he's in the room. Has done a great job getting this one big bill through. The American people, okay, they know that when they see money going to Washington, D.C., and you could be a Democrat or Republican. My most liberal elite Democrats, I always ask them, do you personally believe that sending another $1 trillion down to D.C. is going to make the country better? Do you think it's going to be used for good stuff, or is it just going to go to the interest groups? But my criticism, and they don't, by the way, almost no one believes that. My criticism is there are 13,000 lobbying groups in D.C. There's only like 10 or 12 bank ones, by the way. People think banks are big. We're not actually that big. Now you have private equity is bigger or stuff. And yes, we absolutely should be, I don't know if Gary's here, taxing carried interest and all that. And nor should we allow much SALT deductions, even though it costs me a lot of money. But those groups are so selfish. Cotton, corn, sugar. And when they go to D.C., they're fighting for interest groups, unions, teachers, and it's really damaging our country. So you need leadership like a Ronald Reagan type. They have to explain to the American public why you have to sacrifice, your own personal interest. And if you do, by the way, and we can grow at 3%, you'll still be far better off. So, to me, it's okay to sacrifice a little bit and to get all these groups, and all these groups, a lot of CEOs, they don't even know what their people are asking for in D.C. And their people are going to see people like Gary Cohn every day begging, for a little special thing here, a special thing here, why this should not be discontinued. The government should get rid of all that crap. The American business community doesn't need any special tax breaks at all. They should have rules of the road, good regulations, and let the world compete. And so there's a lot to do. We know what to do. It has been done before. It's just going to be hard.
So how do you see, I guess, what is your takeaway then on this tax bill as it makes its way through Congress right now? Because on the one hand, looks like it increases the debt load. On the other hand, there are stimulative aspects to it as well.
Yeah, so our debt to GDP is 100%. It's going to grow to about 115% over the next 10 years or something like that. Then it's a hockey stick. And the hockey stick is Medicare and Medicaid, maybe a little bit of Social Security. So we see that train coming down the tracks. We know how bad it is. But my view is get the tax bill done. You heard the folks on stage, certainty, business growth, and then focus on other things that grow the economy, permitting, red tape reform, all stuff like that, education, skills, which are all doable. There are a lot of places that do quite a good job at this. Read Our Towns. Jim Fallows writes for Atlantic. He's got this book, Our Towns. You go to Omaha and St. Louis and Bozeman and Austin, and they're innovating, they're growing, they're collaborating. Small D works. It's big D that's failed. And I put California in the big D state, the big D category too, by the way. And so we know what things to do, and we just got to get people to do them. And it works locally. There are schools locally that do a great job training kids in cyber. A teller can make $45,000 or $50,000 a year with full medical, dental, Pilates, massages. We take care of our people, and then the jobs go up, and we have to stop denigrating jobs. Oh, and I don't know if Paul Ryan's in the room. I would double the earned income tax credit. I would take that individual who's making $14,000 a year, and they now get a tax credit if they have 2 children of $6,000. If they have no children, they get $600. I would give them $12,000, whether or not they have children. That money, it would cost about $60 billion, would go directly into their communities, directly to help their families, directly to help their homes. And I would pay for that by getting rid of carried interest. Take it from those rich, And so and if we don't do these things, we're going to continue to have a problem. And I think that'll grow the economy too. There's no question they would spend the money. It has the virtue of bringing people into the workforce. People who work, less recidivism, less crime, more household formation, less depression, less suicide, and that first rung on the ladder leads to the second rung, and pride. And we have to get back to that and not denigrate any job. All jobs are good.
I want to go back to this notion of
even
cost.
Journalism.
We have our place. I want to go back to this idea, this notion of government efficiency and cost cutting and tackling spending. by the government. Today's Elon Musk's last day working with the government. Is Doge and the efforts of Doge at risk here?
In my, when they started that, should the government try to be more efficient? Well, of course they should. Should the people doing that follow the law? Well, of course they should. So people make Doge, not Doge. So, and then I think Ronald Reagan had an effort like Doge, and Bill Clinton actually did have a surplus and did cut a lot of stuff. Absolutely. But my view is, running a big company, if I set up a group at the top and then, I tell you, oh, be more efficient, that doesn't work particularly well. If I meet you each individually, I ask you who your CFO is, who your this is, who your that is, come back, report to me what you're doing, your head count, it's like, that'll work. And so, yeah, they should do it, but that's what the OMB supposedly is for. And so I would embed it in every department. Chris, thank you for being here. You have 40 departments? I mean, I don't even know. Every department that takes money from the American people should publish a short, understandable annual report at the end of the year. You gave me so much billions, I told you I was going to do, and here's what I did. Every one of them. And these programs never die, there's death taxes and the thing that never dies, which is a government program. So yeah, we need to be more efficient. And the government has to demonstrate its competency. If government doesn't demonstrate its competency, the underpinning of being a civil citizen doesn't work. They think we're stealing their money.
Going back to the Reagan years, you think bond vigilantes are back?
Yeah. These are very large numbers. You've seen it a little bit. You had the crack in the bond market in COVID a little bit. The government did the right stuff, then they massively overdid both spending and QE. We borrowed and spent $10 trillion from 2020 to today. Okay, and you heard the numbers before. We also bought $4 trillion of your securities on top of the $4 trillion we bought in the first go round. Those numbers are true globally, not quite as big as ours, but the QE of us was 8 trillion, the QE of the rest of the world was another 8 trillion or something like that. You're talking about huge sums of money. We don't really know the full effect of that. And the bond dealers, which Gary mentioned, inventories are much smaller than they used to be, partially because of rules and regulations. And you are going to see a crack in the bond market, okay? It is going to happen. And I tell this to my regulators, some of who are in this room, I'm telling you it's going to happen, and you're going to panic. I'm not going to panic. We'll be fine. We'll probably make more money, and then some of my friends will tell me that we like crises because it's good for JPMorgan Chase. Not really. I tell people when Credit Suisse went bankrupt with the First Republic, it was terrible for the banking industry. I think we can make everything better, including that, by just changing and modifying certain rules and regulations, letting market makers intermediate more in the market. But to give you a number, like just JP Morgan alone buys and sells $3 trillion a day. And we move $10 trillion a day of money. And we're probably a tenth. So the money moving around the world is $100 trillion a day. The money moving around in the investments, this is stocks, bonds, corporate governments, derivatives, credit, you name it, FX, sovereign debt around the world, 30 trillion. The people who set those long-term rates are those people, including you in the room. It's not the Federal Reserve. They can try to manipulate the long-term rate. They can do what's it called? They do the twist or whatever. It doesn't work for that long. So if you look at economic history, bad things happen. When those tectonic plates shift, it's very hard to see in real time. It is shifting, and this is one of them. I just don't know if it's going to be a crisis in 6 months or 6 years. And I'm hoping that we change both the trajectory of the debt and the ability of market makers to make markets. And also remember, there are a lot of people, going down to Washington who actually like bad markets. And the problem with the bad markets isn't that it's bad for the big banks who make markets. It's bad for the people who raise money, small businesses, asset-backed securities, middle market companies, corporations, the United States government. And that volatility scares people. And then also it happened, markets closed. And you saw that happen multiple times in the last 12 years where you couldn't sell a high yield bond. If you're going to sell a lot of treasuries, you could have had a little bit of issue. So yeah, it's coming. It's just part of all the stuff we talked about. And unfortunately, it may be that we need that to wake us up. It's an unfortunate thing. So.
We do have some Fed officials in the room. So I do want to touch on the Federal Reserve here because the message has seemed to be, we're going to be patient. We're not going to let politics sway our decision and policy, and we can afford to be patient here, given all of the uncertainty with tariffs and the fact that the economy, while slowing, does still seem to be holding up somewhat. That seemed to be the message yesterday too, coming from the Federal Reserve with the release we got on the heels of Fed Chair Powell meeting with President Trump. Is the Fed right to give time here?
Yes. You know, the Fed has a tough job, okay? And I have enormous respect for Jay Powell and a lot of the other Fed folks, but they're not, you know, you hear we say the Fed sets short-term rates. We always say that, right? The Fed sets short, and they actually do set short-term rates. But what happened when inflation went up? They followed. Are they really in charge? I just told you $30 trillion a day. They're not really in charge. They're trying to navigate it so that we have the best possible economy. And so they were late raising rates. You know, they also told all the banks in the world that interest rates aren't going to go up to, you know, won't go higher than 2% when they have these ridiculous stress tests we have to go through, you know, which are a complete waste of time. You know, we do 100 stress tests a week. You think I care about that one? And I knew that rates weren't going to stay at 2%. So we were quite prepared for rates going to 5%. Then they caught up. And now they have to wait and see because it's, you know, it's hard to tell what the effect of, you know, is the economy slowing? I don't know. Is it soft landing? I don't know. The other thing I should have mentioned about as we enter this environment, asset prices are still high. That would be very different if asset prices were still low. That
surprised you?
A little bit, yeah. But I mentioned how much money's been thrown out there. So when you do that kind of giving money to the American citizens through QE or fiscal, money is like water filling every crack. Some of you bought stuff, some of you saved stuff, some of you went into venture capital, some of you went private credit, some of you bought a Rolls Royce, but it fills the cracks, but it definitely lifts up asset prices. And so, you know, there'll be a reversal of that at one point. You know, asset prices come down, you know, that may cause some stress and strain for people. So they're right to wait now. We have, you know, I think inflation may be going up. I don't know. I think there's a lot of stuff in the future, which is inflationary. So if you're the Fed, you can't just say, well, you know, what happened today to consumer prices, which, by the way, if you dig into consumer prices, you would throw out the calculation. It's a lot of mud in there, okay? So it's kind of consistent, you know, month by month by month, but year over year, 3 years from now, with the adjustments they make, I'm not blaming them. It's hard to really tell. And you know, when you look at certain things like gas and milk and eggs and things like that. So, but the future, what I see is inflationary, which is huge fiscal deficits around the world. The whole world is remilitarizing. Infrastructure and green economy. We're going to waste a lot of money in the green economy, and we should do some of it, but it's going to cost a lot of money. Demographics may be inflationary. I don't see the deflationary stuff. Yes, AI may be that, but not next year. I mean, people are spending a lot of money in AI, and you see the projections of data center spending stuff. You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. And we have 600 AI use cases, and it's very efficient, very effective, but it's not going to be and technology is always deflationary. You know, it's kind of like a cosmological constant. And this one may be faster than we've ever experienced. That I think is possibly true.
You touched on permitting, the idea of deregulation, or at least cutting red tape. Can that help to offset that? Can
Totally.
That be
deregulation, permitting, you know, getting rid of the cobwebs, the barnacles in the boat, absolutely. Permitting, you know, we can't get a gas pipeline from Appalachia into New York. We can't get a hydroelectric wire from Canada into Massachusetts. We can't build the grids we need. We can't, I mean, it is extraordinary. There's a mountain pass, which I know you're aware of it. I think it's called Mountain Pass Company. It's a railroad company. They've been waiting for 10 years to get permits. They can make rare earth, they can make magnets in size today. They need a little bit of, you know, subsidy to do it because the Chinese will come in and just undercut. So if you're buying it, and you're going to say, well, I can't buy it from you because it's twice what it is over here. So we do have to have a little something to make up for that. But absolutely, dereg, pro-growth attitude, getting skills right, getting permitting right, not wasting money on fake things, all would accelerate growth. I think we could be growing at 3% a year. That's the other thing we should aspire to grow. You know, and you hear that, which I think is a very positive thing out of the administration today. We want to grow, and that if you had 3% growth, and you did all your CBO numbers, that's a dramatic difference in how much you collect in normal tax about raising them, and how people feel and their incomes are going up pretty dramatically.
We do have the SEC commissioner sitting in the room. What are you seeing in terms of the IPO pipeline and what it takes to go public? Are public markets broken? Because I've spoken to some investors who would make the argument that yes, they are.
This is a great frustration of mine. And we've gone from, in 1996, we had 8,000 public companies. We now have 4,000. And I'm talking about operating companies. And that's apples to apples. There are a lot more of these REITs and investment companies. I'm talking about companies that make stuff, sell stuff, buy stuff, et cetera. And private equity, I'm not against private equity. It's gone from owning 1,000 to 25,000. And private credit has grown like this, and the mortgage business has left the banking business pretty much. All of that was all done, and this really irritated, without any forethought on the part of our regulators. Like zero, none, nada. Not one conversation about the effect of requirements of the capital, liquidity, or seeker, what it's going to do in these markets. There are some good things about those markets. There's some bad things about those markets. I'm not against private credit, but the one that bothers me the most is, we used to have a very active small business IPO thing. But if you're a small business, and I'm talking about, you make 100 million in profits and you might be worth, $1.5 billion or something, the cost of registering, the litigation, the disclosure requirements, the cookie cutter board, instead of having a board of 5 with people you really like, who've been your whole life, the registration requirements, the compensation requirements, the press, loves to beat up companies. We need to create an active small market, and then we need to get rid of people like ISS and Glass Lewis. How they seeped into our system, they are like they are a cancer and it's snuck in, and I'm to blame for this too. I didn't realize it. I'm going back years ago that these guys, and who do they go to first? All the pension plans, CalPERS, CalSTRS, New York, all the do-gooders around the world. And then they started to use that to look at green stuff and comp stuff and social stuff. And we were filling out forms. And I've told people, I'm not filling out any more forms voluntarily. If you want to fill out a form voluntarily at JPMorgan Chase, you need my permission. And we were filling it out for this ESG thing and that ESG thing and this DEI thing and the ISS thing. And that thing seeped up. And now 30% of the votes, and the people lie. They automatically voted by ISS and Glass Lewis, which, by the way, violates their fiduciary responsibility. And when they say to me, well, we don't have the manpower, you have the manpower to read some proxies. It's not a big deal, and so people should take more self-responsibility. We should change how we do no broker votes. We should change how people have to do it. And those people should be held to fire. They can say whatever they want, do whatever they want, put whatever numbers on. They have no requirement to be accurate. So Jay Clayton had passed something that's saying, if a company disagrees with their numbers, they have to respond and stuff like that, but they have no liability. You got to bring that back, and then we can have active markets. There are, one of the benefits about JPMorgan Chase is if you go to Sweden, they set up a small account. This is a great thing where, you could put in not all the money you want, but up to millions of dollars. You pay 1% a year, no capital gains. You can take the money in and out at will. Their stock market is growing like this, and they made it much easier for small companies to register. Less disclosures, less requirements, more flexibility, and they've added hundreds of companies. So you guys should look around the world and say, what do we want to do? And we did this all thoughtlessly. And of course, some people think it's a good thing. My view is healthy public markets are probably better than having moved all that into private markets, but we're going to find out.
I'm going to bring this back to the beginning of the conversation. I'm going to ask, what are you seeing? Because you have so many clients, small business, large business, global investors, consumers, and you have a global footprint. So what are you seeing and how are you counseling your clients? And is it different with those in the US versus those who are non-US, given this global realignment we find ourselves in?
Well, so the US, Europe's done a pretty good job crippling itself. So the US stock market's worth 60 trillion. I think Frankfurt is 3. The UK is 3. Paris is 3. And that's gotten much worse over time. Their GDP per person has dropped. It used to be close to ours, and now it's 25-30% less. That's how important these things are for the people. And all these things I talk about, they hurt lower paid people more than anyone in this room. I mean, that's the amazing thing when you have these debates about policy. You hear this constant refrain, you're just talking your own book. I'm saying, no, we're talking the book of all of our citizens. You want to lift them up, change these policies. So I think if you are a company and you want to raise money in high yield, and the markets are wide open for certain types of IPOs and high yield, get the money. You just heard me talk about the moving tectonic plates. Markets sometimes will do what they have to do to screw the most people. You got to get prepared. Don't assume. And in credit markets in particular, and Gary, is Gary in the room? Do you know what the credit derivative spread is to guarantee American debt now is? It's 50 basis points or 45 basis points. It's the same as guaranteeing Italy or Greece. Okay, so the credit spreads could gap out dramatically. So if rates go up, so can credit spreads, and they're historically low. So, take advantage of that if you're going to need the money. So if there is some kind of crisis, down the road, you can handle it.
All right, before we wrap this up, I do want to ask, almost two decades at the helm at JPMorgan, $4 trillion bank, one of the most successful CEOs of modern times. What are some of the lessons or advice that you would share with this room of policymakers and business leaders?
So get out, talk to people, talk to clients, I talk to everybody. I think our government should, Eisenhower had a lunch or dinner every week with the opposing side leadership. Absolutely. You learn a lot. You learn to respect a lot. You learn to respect opposing views. You learn about complaints. You learn about competitors. Don't put your head in the sand. Observe, and have all your people do it. And it's a never-ending process because we have competitors from around the world, and they're smart and they're tough and they're coming. Bureaucracy, I gave a speech recently with our own senior people. Bureaucracy is extraordinary. If you look at companies, Sears, Kmart, digital equipment, Nokia phones, BlackBerry, they all went bankrupt, and so did half the financial companies in my short tenure, and it was almost always arrogance, greed, complacency, bureaucracy in almost all cases. And it just festered. People look at the number, they bullshit themselves about how they're making money or why they're making money, or, and then they had these political things, make the boss feel good, don't embarrass someone. When people say to me, they, put a good foot forward, I always say, don't put a good foot forward, put the truth forward, 100% the truth, and tell us, then we'll deal with it, it's okay. And so a deep, honest assessment, I'd say you have to grit. You got to, like, every day, man, put your jersey on and just go with it, fight. Get involved with governments and regulators. I see them just as regularly as I see anybody else. And I'm going to say humility and curiosity. People don't want to work for jerks. They don't want to work for people who blame them. They don't want to work for someone who can't get on a road trip. We do bus trips. We do trips around the world, and we go to the branches, and shake clients' hands and take a complaint or two. People want to know that you have a little heart, you have a little humility, you care a lot, and and when leaders, it's about them. People know, and that's a different kind of. Now, companies can do quite well at that because sometimes those people are quite capable for a while. They will not build a great company. That's a different issue. So anyway, I did a thing you can get on YouTube. We actually put it out there. It was 90 minutes about some of these learnings I've had in my life. I had a little fun doing it, but to put it on YouTube, we had to edit out the 30 minutes where I say things I shouldn't say. And I also went around the room and said, I said, I don't mean to embarrass you, but I got to tell them this thing that you did but I had to give real examples. Because you don't give real examples, people don't understand it. And the real examples are just devastating and funny and hard to watch sometimes.
Final question for you. I'm not going to ask you a succession question. I know you hashed that out at your investor day last week.
I will have a successor one day, yes.
Yes. But I am going to ask you this before we get off the stage, and that is, what would it take? What would be the scenario that you would entertain to consider public service?
All right, ready? I'll tell you, if I thought I could really win, which I don't think I could.
Jamie Dimon.
Guys, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good job.
¿Qué cuento quieres hoy? ¿Te cuento uno de los míos? ¿El del farmacéutico? ¿O el de María, la abogada?
El de Ana, la arquitecta.
Vale. Eras una niña que soñaba con crear los edificios más impresionantes de la Tierra. Se pasaba el día dibujándolos. Sabía que algún día acabarían llegando a lo más alto de cada ciudad. Y que cualquier persona...
Cada profesional tiene detrás una historia increíble. Creer en ella es lo que de verdad cuenta. Arquia Banca, el banco de los profesionales.
Recibes un mensaje alarmante de tu inquilino en el que te informa que no puede pagar el alquiler.
No te preocupes, SEAC está aquí para ayudarte. Nuestro equipo te asegura que recibirás tu renta a tiempo. Con SEAC, tu renta está protegida. Recibes el ingreso en tu cuenta como siempre. Disfruta de la tranquilidad sabiendo que SEAC maneja el imprevisto por ti. Alquila tranquilo. SEAC responde.
Silver Gold Patrimonio nace en 2018 con el objetivo de innovar en el mercado de los metales preciosos de inversión, ofreciendo nuevas alternativas para que cualquier persona, familia o empresa pueda entrar en el fantástico mundo de los metales de inversión de forma sencilla y acompañada por consultores expertos en el sector. Silver Gold Patrimonio quiere avanzar contigo.
¿Qué cuento quieres hoy? ¿Te cuento uno de los míos? ¿El del farmacéutico? ¿O el de María, la abogada?
El de Ana, la arquitecta.
Vale. Érase una niña que soñaba con crear los edificios más impresionantes de la Tierra. Se pasaba el día dibujándolos. Sabía que algún día acabarían llegando a lo más alto de cada ciudad. Y que cualquier persona...
Cada profesional tiene detrás una historia increíble. Creer en ella es lo que de verdad cuenta. Banca, el banco de los profesionales.
¿Puede privatizarse la democracia? Quizá es esa la pregunta que nos tenemos que hacer todos. Un globalismo que afecta a todo lo que sustenta nuestras vidas. Realidad económica tangible, necesaria de analizar. Esa necesidad de analizar el globalismo desde el punto de vista absolutamente económico, tangible y real.
En el corazón de Madrid, descubre los Montes de Galicia, donde la tradición gallega se encuentra con la innovación culinaria. Saborea nuestros mariscos frescos, carnes jugosas y postres caseros. Todo preparado con ingredientes de la más alta calidad. Disfruta de una experiencia gastronómica única en un ambiente acogedor y elegante. Los Montes de Galicia, donde cada comida es una celebración. ¡Te esperamos!
Las toallitas, si se tiran al inodoro, pueden atascar nuestras tuberías y suponen una amenaza para el medio ambiente.
Mamá, voy a meter una canasta por el medio ambiente. Atención.
Isabel tiene su toallita en las manos.
¡Tira hacia el pasillo!
Sabe que la jugada es decisiva. ¡Lanza ahí! ¡A la papelera!
Juega limpio. Encesta las toallitas en la papelera. Canal de Isabel II. Cuidamos el agua.
Rubén Gisbert, buenos días.
Buenos días, José.
¿Cómo ves la fotografía del final de la guerra de Ucrania? Parece que cada vez más complicado, ¿no?
Bueno, vamos a ver, porque ayer Donald Trump volvió a decir sus famosas 2 semanas, ya lleva 2 meses diciendo que le da a Putin 2 semanas. Parece un poco la película de Esta casa es una ruina, cuando le pregunta ¿cuándo va a terminar? En 2 semanas, ¿no? Al final son varios años y la casa sigue como está. Pues efectivamente pareciera que Trump está dando patadas hacia adelante de una pelota en la que intenta de alguna manera ver si se puede congeniar con Putin para establecer unos objetivos claros, en el cual vemos que además Rusia ya empieza también a hacer movimientos bastante concretos. El próximo día 2, el lunes, tenemos otra reunión en Estambul entre la delegación rusa y la delegación ucraniana, y se han filtrado unos puntos clave que Rusia va a establecer para poder aceptar un alto el fuego. Lo fundamental como siempre ha sido la cuestión de Ucrania, es que la OTAN nunca esté en Ucrania y además un acuerdo firmado o poner por escrito lo que en su día Bush padre y Gorbachev habrían hablado simplemente verbalmente, ¿no? El contrato de que la OTAN no se extendería más hacia el este, así como el levantamiento de sanciones por parte de Rusia y la descongelación de los activos rusos. Esa es la información que se filtraba ayer o que se daba ayer después de las declaraciones de Lavrov. Y que en principio, bueno, pues lo que llamaría la atención de esto es que entonces, ¿por qué reunirse con Ucrania? ¿Por qué Rusia querría establecer relaciones directas con Ucrania en Estambul? Tanto como lo hizo pasadamente como a partir del lunes. Y parece que los puntos clave que quiere negociar Rusia están más circunscritos a quizá una reunión con Rutte o con el propio Trump que con Ucrania. Bueno, pues forma parte también de las grandes incógnitas de que ya no sabemos exactamente qué es lo que se está dirimiendo en ese telón de fondo, donde no vemos lo que está pasando, pero desde luego que están adoptando decisiones importantes y hay un tira y afloja. Al mismo tiempo, Alemania está tomando ciertas decisiones que ya sabemos que van a tener una respuesta por parte de Rusia, como es la entrega de los Taurus, que tienen 2.500 kilómetros de alcance efectivo y que podrían llevar una táctica, tienen la posibilidad de llevar una táctica nuclear al centro de Moscú. Rusia no va a permitir nunca jamás eso. Y el hecho de que Merz esté diciendo que está dispuesto a establecer una fábrica de ensamblaje, un centro de ensamblaje dentro de la propia Ucrania, es decir, fabricar ellos los Taurus, ensamblarlos, mandar el personal, pero después pintarles una banderita ucraniana y decir que son misiles ucranianos, ¿no? Cuanto menos, pues es un agente más desestabilizador de lo que se supone que se quiere poner en marcha por parte de la administración norteamericana y rusa, que es un nuevo periodo de comercio, de cooperación comercial para que Trump pueda hacer la guerra contra China y para que Rusia pueda centrarse en el crecimiento económico. Sin embargo, como vemos siempre en la política y en la geopolítica, pues el tablero es más complicado. Hay más elementos que están intentando cada uno llevárselas con su sardina y desde luego pues también sabemos que hay muchos elementos que quieren que la guerra continúe, que no se pare y vamos a ver, ¿no? Hay que esperar de manera clave al próximo lunes a ver qué es lo que sale de ese nuevo encuentro.
¿Crees que la reunión de la OTAN va a ser un punto fundamental? La reunión de la OTAN donde decía Trump que incluso podía no acudir si no se llegaba a un acuerdo del 5%, pero puede poner un punto y aparte ya en la relación entre Rusia y Estados Unidos, si de la reunión de la OTAN de junio sale un posicionamiento ya de enfrentamiento con Rusia de Occidente, con Estados Unidos y Trump también ampliando sanciones o poniendo encima de la mesa un cambio de actitud?
Bueno, yo veo complicado que Trump imponga sanciones a Rusia, a no ser que se vea, digamos, muy mal en cuanto a popularidad de cara a una contienda electoral, sobre todo para las midterm, ¿no? Que la tiene dentro de un año y unos meses. Efectivamente, yo sí espero que la reunión de la OTAN se circunscriba a lo que viene siendo la OTAN, que es una organización antirrusa, y sobre todo en el contexto de lo que a Trump le interesa, ¿no? Que es que la Unión Europea asuma en 5 años el sostenimiento total de la OTAN. Es decir, esos 850.000 millones que von der Leyen ha dicho que hay que gastarse en defensa en 5 años para que prevenirnos del ataque de Rusia, porque ahora no estamos en condiciones de defendernos. Sin embargo, Rusia, en vez de atacarnos ahora, cuando estamos diciendo bombo y platillo que no podemos defendernos, lo va a hacer dentro de 5 años, que es todo totalmente, o sea, no tiene ningún sentido absolutamente nada. Aquí de lo que se trata es de generar un pretexto, establecer un marco en el cual se pueda convencer al conjunto de la opinión pública europea a ese gasto descomunal de 850.000 millones, y el único pretexto es la rusofobia por parte del conjunto de la Unión Europea. Por lo tanto, creo que va a ser uno de los puntos fundamentales y ahí Trump poco o nada tiene que decir, más que decir, oigan, ¿ustedes van a sostener la OTAN, sí o no? Sobre todo porque lo que sostiene realmente son las 5 principales empresas armamentísticas del mundo que están afincadas en Estados Unidos y suponen una parte importante del pellizco del Producto Interior Bruto norteamericano. Eso es lo que le importa a Donald Trump. Donald Trump no va a estar para payasadas de teatros en los cuales los europeos tienen que decir que los rusos son muy malos y que tienen que gastarse tanto. Eso es un trabajo que ya harán los europeos, ¿no? Trump por eso ni se preocupa, ya se apañarán ellos.
A partir de aquí, el foco de atención se centra en un cambio de modelo. Se está intentando conseguir una tregua en Oriente Medio, pero la situación es altamente complicada. Lo mismo en la guerra de Ucrania.
la situación en Asia-Pacífico es de una tensión muy elevada. ¿Hay un cambio de modelo de situación geopolítica a nivel internacional donde ONU y todos los entornos que se había dotado el mundo ya no sirven?
Bueno, más que un cambio de modelo, lo que hay es un cambio de ciclo. Yo creo que eso es evidente y que hasta el más... hasta el que sigue menos la actualidad geopolítica a día de hoy puede darse cuenta que desde luego pues China es un elemento fundamental, los BRICS son un elemento cada vez más importante, más preponderante. El impasse en el cual está Estados Unidos, que lo estamos viendo día a día con Donald Trump, ¿no? Donald Trump ha querido poner en marcha este segundo mandato desde el primer momento con muchas órdenes ejecutivas, con una serie de medidas que él tenía estudiadas previamente muchísimo, el primer día no sé cuántas docenas de órdenes ejecutivas, como poner en marcha todo un plan, una arquitectura compleja para modificar lo que habían sido los últimos 80 años de Estados Unidos, vinculados al crecimiento de la Segunda Guerra Mundial de un complejo militar industrial muy fuerte, como ya estableció en su día Eisenhower, y Donald Trump quisiera volver un poco pues, a la era McKinley, o sea, desde la era McKinley a la era Roosevelt, ¿no? En la cual Estados Unidos sea un agente comercial, sea un elemento clave del comercio mundial, en clave de fabricación, en clave adaptada al siglo XXI. ¿En qué? Pues sobre todo en las tecnologías, la inteligencia artificial, etcétera, etcétera. ¿Qué pasa? Pues que para hacer eso tienes unas grandísimas resistencias, como son los grandes núcleos económicos que a día de hoy viven precisamente de que Estados Unidos se mantenga como está, ¿no? Y efectivamente ahí están las élites corporativas, el complejo militar industrial, pero también una gran parte de los sectores de producción que están vinculados a todo ello. Eso también explica el hecho de que, por ejemplo, en la demanda de 12 estados que ha paralizado esos aranceles por parte del Tribunal Internacional Comercial, que se llama Tribunal Internacional Comercial porque es un tribunal federal que está centrado en dirimir cuestiones de comercio internacional, no porque sea compuesto por elementos internacionales o sea un tribunal internacional. Es decir, es un tribunal de Estados Unidos que está especializado en cuestiones de exportaciones e importaciones. Pues precisamente dentro de la demanda de esos 12 estados había uno republicano, ¿no? Porque en Estados Unidos, al haber separación de poderes y haber representación, lo importante no es el partido. Para el senador o para el congresista lo importante es si la medida que yo voy a apoyar o no voy a apoyar va a beneficiar o va a perjudicar a mis electores. Y si van a cerrar fábricas, si van a perder empleo, desde luego yo no voy a salir reelegido, aunque el que esté en la Casa Blanca sea del mismo partido. Una cosa que en España, por desgracia...
En directo, cuando son las 7:41, hora central europea, nos vamos hasta Cabo Cañaveral, en Florida, porque se está produciendo en directo en este instante. Están viendo esa señal que nos llega, el lanzamiento del Falcon 9 de la misión GPS-37 a órbita terrestre desde Cabo Cañaveral. Estamos hablando de un lanzamiento que pone en marcha la compañía SpaceX de Elon Musk. Esa es la señal que nos llega en directo en una semana tremendamente importante para SpaceX, porque la compañía ha conseguido el beneplácito para continuar llevando a cabo sus lanzamientos. Hay que recordar que hace 2 días el cohete Starship de SpaceX explotó sobre el Océano Índico durante su 9ª prueba. Pues en directo se produce ese lanzamiento desde Cabo Cañaveral, en Florida. Ahí están viendo esa imagen del lanzamiento.
At T+30 seconds and counting, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Now, during the rocket's ascent, we tilt or gimbal the engines, and that'll turn the rocket horizontally in a maneuver known as a gravity turn. So the rocket is still going up.
Power telemetry nominal.
Good call out there. So the rocket is still going up, but now it's also
Estamos viendo en directo el lanzamiento de la misión Falcon 9 GPS-37 a la órbita terrestre media desde el complejo de lanzamiento espacial 40 en la estación de la Fuerza Espacial de Cabo Cañaveral en Florida. El despegue se ha producido en este momento cuando son hora central europea a las 19:42. Existía una oportunidad de respaldo el sábado 31 ante la imposibilidad de que se produjera ese lanzamiento. Se trata del cuarto vuelo del propulsor de primera etapa que respalda esta misión, que previamente lanzó CRS-32, NROL-69 y una misión Starlink. Tras la separación de las etapas, la primera etapa aterrizará en la nave no tripulada a Shortfall of Gravitas, que está estacionada en el Océano Atlántico. La transmisión web en vivo de esta misión se está produciendo precisamente a través del canal oficial de SpaceX.
Main engine cutoff, or MECO, is where all 9 Merlin 1D engines shut down to slow the vehicle down in preparation for stage separation, which is where the first stage separates from the second stage. Followed by this, the MVAC engine on the second stage will light, which is called out as Second Engine Start 1, or SES1.
Now this engine burn, lasting several minutes, will propel the second stage and the payload to orbit. In addition to these 3 major events, the fairing halves will separate shortly after SES1, so keep an eye out for all of these events coming up in just a few moments from now.
Nominal trajectory.
Coming up in just a few moments, we should hear the call out for fairing separation.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Good call out there for fairing separation and a beautiful view of Earth from space. As mentioned earlier, we will be attempting to retrieve these fairing halves using our recovery vessel Doug once they fall back to Earth.
And these are some absolutely phenomenal views today. Now, we're currently at the T+4 minute mark into today's mission. Next major milestone coming up will be just past the T+6 minute mark, which will be the first stage's entry burn. For the entry burn, we'll be relighting 3 of the M1D engines on the first stage, starting with the center E9 engine, followed shortly after by the E1 and E5 engines. This will help slow down the vehicle as it passes back into Earth's denser, lower atmosphere. We need to slow it down to reduce re-entry forces, which ultimately helps us recover and reuse the first stage.
During the entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating by firing its Merlin engines, but we're still moving really fast. This causes the vehicle to fly through Merlin's exhaust gases, and this deposits a layer of soot on the vehicle's surface, which is why our flight-proven vehicles look the way they do. That soot comes from the carbon-based fuel that Falcon 9 uses. As you can see on your screen, on the bottom left, the first stage is decelerating and heading to its rendezvous point at sea.
Now, reusability is, of course, key to lowering the cost of spaceflight, which enables more investment in critical scientific research. The Falcon 9 first stage that is supporting today's mission is
2 nominal trajectories.
Another good call out there. The Falcon 9 first stage that is supporting today's mission is flying for its 4th time. And while this booster is on its 4th trip to space, we're working towards qualifying our fleet of Falcon boosters and fairings to support 40 missions each. And for those following along, we're currently at 28 flights of a single Falcon booster, which is absolutely amazing. Increasing Falcon's flight count provides valuable information on repeated reuse, which is a critical element for making life multiplanetary. about 15 seconds from now, we should hear that call out for the first stage entry burn startup.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
And great call out there for entry burn startup of the Falcon 9 first stage. And you can actually see which engines are lit with that graphic at the lower left-hand corner of your screen.
Stage 1 STS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And great call out there for entry burn shutdown of the Falcon 9 first stage.
The Merlin engines on the Falcon's first stage are optimized for sea leveling, and these achieve 190,000 pounds of thrust during ascent and descent. And while it won't be visible on this webcast,